All right, in this video, I'm going to go over some of the tools that you'll find on the Modify panel, which is located on the Home ribbon. So some of them are maybe pretty straightforward. Maybe you've already done these, but you'll find too that some of them have certain options that allow you to be a little bit more specific about what you're doing. This first one I'm doing is move, and keep in mind that the short key, the hotkey for this is M. I can pick an object and press enter when I'm done selecting what I want to move, and it's going to ask me for a base point. So let's say I want to move this circle from its current location so that its center is at one of the corners of this rectangle. So what I would do, and you need to control your object snap settings. Right now, what I have turned on are these ones here on the lower right. But anyway, I'm going to select the center, and then I'm going to move it to the end point or corner of that rectangle. Okay. The copy command, again, this one is pretty straightforward. Pick what you want to copy, press enter. Most of these commands have multiple steps that you need to kind of input information, whether it's a placement or a numeric value or something. The base point, let's see here. I'm going to make a copy from this point here to this point here. Okay. You could also, let's say I want to take this and I want to copy it from this point, and I want to give it a value of, like, let's say 5 units over to the right. I can lead the cursor over to the right, press 5, and then hit enter. Okay. So maybe I want it to go further. So I'm going to click on it, copy or move. These functions work similarly. 10 units over. Okay, so now it's a little bit further. Rotate. The rotate tool, as the name suggests, allows you to rotate an object. So I picked this rectangle, I'm pressing enter. And by the way, let's do this where I'm going to get rid of this one. I'm going to make a copy of my circle here, this time from one corner to the other. And now if I do the rotate command, and again, I use a lot of hotkey strokes or short strokes. RO is the same thing as clicking that rotate at the top. Okay, this time I'm going to pick multiple objects. And press enter. And let's say I want to rotate with this midpoint as my base point about which the rotation will happen. Click there, and I can either input a value, or I can use my cursor to rotate it. So right now I've got ortho set to on. If I wanted to rotate it at some more arbitrary angle, I could turn that off, and now it's going to allow me to rotate at wherever I choose here. But as you can see on the right there, I could also input a value, like let's say 60 degrees, and press enter. So that's rotate. I'm going to undo that by pressing U. And next, what I'm going to do is mirror an object. So I'm going to click on mirror. MI is the short stroke for that, or the alias. Choose what I want to mirror, press enter. And now I'm going to pick an axis for the mirror line. So I want my rectangle to be right here. So I'm going to choose this point and this point, right? And you'll get prompted to say whether or not you want to erase the source object. If I was to put in yes, that is going to be what happens. Okay, I'm going to redo that. Mirror, pick this rectangle, press enter, and then I'm going to pick 2 points along that axis. Okay, right, and exited too quickly. Let's do that one more time. Mirror. Erase objects, no. Okay. And now if I wanted to mirror, let's say I want to mirror those 2 rectangles along a horizontal axis. Oops, mirror. pick the 2 this time, press enter. This is one point of my mirror line, and then anywhere right or left for the second point. And again, this, I'm constraining it horizontally, vertically, because I've got ortho on. I keep exiting out of there. Let's do this one more time. Mirror, pick the 2 objects, enter, pick a point, erase objects, no. Okay, there they are. Okay, the scale command. So let's make a copy of one of these rectangles. And let's say I want to make this rectangle to have the same proportions from vertical to horizontal, but just twice as big. I'll click on scale. You can type in SC to get to use a hotkey. Press enter. And let's say I want to use, I want it to scale relative to this corner here. This is going to be my base point. And I can either pick an arbitrary point somewhere here, or I could input a value. It's asking me for a scale factor. So if I want it to be twice as big, I'm going to put in 2 and press enter. Let's scale. Let's work with these tools under the array. So this might look a little different on your screen, depending if you've done this step already. The default would be that it's going to produce a rectangular array. So if I click on array, and I have this kind of 4-square grid, I'm going to pick this square and I'll press enter, and it's going to default to 4 columns and 3 rows. I can always change it and say I want an equal number of columns and rows. I can also adjust the space between them if I wanted them to be further apart. In my rows and my columns, I can change those values. Okay. Now let's make, we'll do another tool here. I'm going to make a circle. We'll use a different kind of array. I'm going to make a line from the quad point here. So we can make it a 1 unit long line. And now I'm going to use the polar array. Now, one thing you'll notice is sometimes I pick the object that I'm going to modify first, and sometimes I pick the command. For a lot of commands, it's either way is fine. I've already selected what I want to array, and this time I'm going to do a polar array. So the center point of the array is going to be the center of the circle. And it is by default going to make 6 items, and it's going to make them fill the entire circle. Let's say I only wanted these items to go to the 270-degree mark here. I can type in 270, and you can see it's still got 6 items, but they're only going to here. You can increase the number of items. And again, if this is still 270, they're not going to go all the way around the circle. Okay, so that's polar array. There are a number of tools towards the right here. By default, you might see this as trim. Let's say this line stretched across this other line, and I want to chop off this part here. Click on trim. TR is the short keystrokes for that, and then pick what you want to trim. If, for example, the line did not meet this one and you wanted it to extend, you would click on this little arrow and choose extend and pick the line. Right now, I just need to be on the side of the line closest to here. If I'm hovering over here, nothing's going to happen. But as soon as I pass that midpoint, now I can click it and it will extend it. Okay, there's another tool on this main part of the panel here called offset. Right, and basically it would allow me to create a copy of something a certain distance away from that thing. So slightly different than copy. because it works with not just things like this line that I'm going to offset, but you could offset a more complex object. So offset specify distance. If I want to offset it by 1 unit, it's already here. I could either enter 1 or I could just press enter and it would assume I want the same distance. And then it's going to ask me what I want to offset. So if I wanted to offset this line, I select it. And then it's going to ask me to choose the side you want to offset to. So I'm going to click on this side. So as I mentioned, if I was to copy this arc here, it wouldn't change its size. And that's where offset becomes kind of a useful tool. If I want to accept the same distance for the offset, I'm going to press enter. And then it'll ask me what I want to offset. If I want to offset this arc, I select it, and then I choose either inside or outside. And you'll notice it's changing the radius of that arc. Okay, let's do the stretch tool. So let's say I have an object drawn that looks like this. Okay. Now, I just made this using something called a polyline tool. I typed in PL to do this. And the difference between a polyline and just a series of lines is that this is joined into one object. If I had used the line command to make this, you'll see that they're each individual items. If you use polyline, it's going to join them into one. Okay, when I pick it, you see all these grips appearing at the corners. Okay, but I want to go over the stretch tool. So this is good if I have, like, let's say I'm going to offset this. And I want to stretch this so that this dimension stays the same, but this dimension right here gets longer. So again, if you have a lot of things to draw, this may be a faster way to, increase the size or decrease the size of something. So I'm going to go to stretch. And what I'm going to make is something called a crossing. So the crossing goes from right to left. And I want to capture in it the corners here and the corners here. I'm done selecting, so I press enter. And then I'm going to pick 2 points. I could choose a point on the object, but for this example, I'm going to keep my cursor up here, and I'm just going to input a value of, let's say, 4, enter. So you see it stretched it 4 units to the right, and it stretched everything. So I didn't have to do it kind of individually. All right, so those are the main ones that you'll use here. Of course, there's also the erase tool, which can be really handy. Of course, you may find it's faster to type in E for erase, but that tool is there in case you kind of forget or you prefer to use the icons. All right, if you look at the panel, next to modify, there's a little pull down, and there's a few more tools in this group that I find to be very useful. So some of these are less commonly used. Lengthen could be a useful one, and we'll go through that. Let's see here. I'm going to make a line here. And I'm going to choose lengthen. Select an object to measure, pick it, enter the total length. I'm going to lengthen it by 5 units. So let's go through this again. Lengthen is the tool. Going back to the panel here. Okay, there's a number of ways that you can use this tool. I'm going to accept the default of total, and then I'm going to actually input a value. So this line right here is 10 units long. If I wanted to make it 20, I could put in 20. And then if I click on one end of the line, it makes it 20, but towards the left. If I click on the right side, it's going to make it towards the right. So now if I type in distance, I'm going to check it. DIST, by the way, is the way to bring that up. You'll see it's 20. Now I can also use this tool. So let's undo here. Let's say I have a line here and I want to make this one as long as that one. I can use the same tool. So let's go to Lengthen. Okay. Select object to measure. Press enter. I'm going to click on these two endpoints, and then it's asking me to select an object to change. And I'm going to click on that same line. So now they should be exactly the same. Distance 24.1007, 24.1. So it's kind of like a way of matching a length. Now for the next tool, it's called join. And again, this is not something maybe that you would use quite a bit, but it could be useful in some instances. So the join will allow you to take two objects and make them one. But there's some kind of limitations to this. They need to be within the same linear path. So for example, I have these two lines here. I couldn't join them because they're not along the same path here. In this, I made some modifications to this object. Before they were, one closed polyline. I exploded them so that I could sort of illustrate this. You can see here that I've got a line here, and it's indicating its endpoint through these grips and its midpoint, and I have another one here. Typically, if you're drawing something like a floor plan, you would want to avoid this kind of condition where you have two lines that kind of meet somewhere in the middle. Why? Well, perhaps you want to find the midpoint of the length from here to here. And as you can see, the midpoint for this line is here, and the midpoint for this line is here. So join would allow you to connect the two. So I've just typed in join, and again, you could use this tool here on the modify panel. And now when I click on this, it's one entity, not two. So join works in an instance where things are in the same linear path. These two are not. Also something like this, even though this has the same radius, join will not work in this instance. So when I try to join those two, it doesn't do that. So that's the join tool. We went through trim and extend. One we didn't talk about yet was something called fillet. So I have two lines here, and let's say I want them to join at a 90-degree angle. If I click on this tool or type in F for fillet, and then I pick one line and I pick the other line, they will join at 90 degrees. Now, a fillet, that term comes from welding, and often you'll find with a fillet that instead of coming with a 90-degree angle, it's actually a curve. So this tool, although we often use it to generate 90-degree angles, another way to do it, to use the tool, is to assume a radius or input a radius. So if I said 1, for example, and then I pick the two same lines, I'm going to get this curve. Okay, so fillet, if I want it to be 90 degrees, I have to input the radius as 0 and then pick the two lines. And that's going to be what the default setting is anyway. A similar tool, or at least a similar process, but a different outcome, is something called a chamfer. So instead of getting a radius here, I'm just going to have an angle, and the default is a 45-degree angle, but you can change that angle. So let's say I pick chamfer, and again, this time I'm just going to pick the two, and I'm going to get that same 90-degree angle. So let's undo, and then go back to the chamfer tool. And it's going to ask, you know, here's where I can put in a distance or an angle. So let's say I put for my distance 1, and then I click on the 2 lines here and here. You'll see I get an angled line with that 1 unit measurement. So again, that's a chamfer. So, you know, you'll find if you kind of explore some of these tools that there are other things that they can do. But I would say that those are, for the most part, the most commonly used ones. And you'll find that you kind of really need to know those well and how they operate and how you can manipulate things to be able to maneuver in AutoCAD. That's it.